more we study reality, the weirder it gets. There's no hope of understanding this. We certainly might have the illusion that we figured it out. But the core of reality is a total mystery.
Welcome to the musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
I'm John Timpane.
On this podcast, we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, jobs, hobbies, and passions.
Difference makers who really make a difference. Our guest today on the musical Innertube is a true pal of the podcast, a guy whom we've been wanting to have on for a long time. He is John Horgan, a much published, much awarded writer about science and much else. A graduate of the Columbia University School of Journalism, John has written for National Geographic, Scientific American, with whom he had quite a tenure, the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, and many other prominent places. Among his books are 1966's The End of Science, Facing the Limits of Science in the Twilight of the Scientific Age, 1999's The Undiscovered Mind, How the Human Brain Defies Replication, Medication, and Explanation, and 2012's The End of War, which he published with McSweeney's, and several other really good ones. Since 2005, John's been director of the Center for Science Writings at Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey, where he also teaches science journalism, history of science, and other courses. He has all sorts of famous people come talk as well. And then he invited me. Since John is so well versed in science, let's start the conversation by talking about India. John and I and my wonderful spouse, Maria Christina Keller, and many others recently went to India, where we saw the Taj Mahal, the Rag Ghat, which is the memorial shrine to Gandhi. The other folks saw that. I stayed in bed. And a really great wedding in Calcutta. John Horgan, let's start this way. A month down the line, what's the first image that arises in memory when I ask you about India?
Pollution so thick that it makes me choke. Maybe I shouldn't start with something so negative. India was overwhelming. I've never been to Asia before, let alone India. I was really eager to see it. We didn't really get out of the two big cities. Delhi, I was in Delhi for 5 days. We were in Delhi for 5 days, and then Calcutta for another 5. And I had heard that the pollution was bad, but it was really bad. It shocked me that the traffic was also terrible. So I wish I'd gotten outside of the big cities. They were, I found them dirty, clamorous, kind of overwhelming, just an assault on the senses. There were some beautiful sights, some astonishing sights like the Taj Mahal, but even the Taj Mahal, to get to it, we had to endure some really terrible crowds. I also had the same reaction to the Taj Mahal that I had to the Vatican, which I saw for the first time, maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, which was, this is something that was built out of the blood and sweat of the desperately poor. And beautiful, but it seems kind of morally corrupt.
Yes.
So I found the Taj Mahal gorgeous, but grotesque. And also, I should have known this before we went, but I didn't realize it was a giant mausoleum. Nobody ever lived in the Taj Mahal. It was this, a Muslim warlord. It was something that he had built for one of his dead wives. And then he was buried there after he died. And that's it. It's just this enormous structure for a couple of dead people that everybody else then goes and admires. So
you bring up such a fine point about how if you travel through the world and you see these enormous public works and buildings and achievements, the Great Wall of China is another one I thought of, the Pantheon, the Colosseum. Almost all of these are built with either slave labor or something pretty close to it, and it faces the world traveler with a question, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we're still living with terrible inequality. Another thing that sort of slapped me in the face in India was something that bothers me when I live in Hoboken, New Jersey, right across from New York City. I can see it here in Hoboken and especially in New York, which is the unfairness of life. So it's an obvious fact that you face as soon as you become sentient and capable of reflection, that some people have a lot in life and others have virtually nothing through sheer luck. And I see civilization ideally as a way of evening the odds a little bit and making sure that at least everybody has a decent shot at happiness and a decent life.
That's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. But of course it's not. And in India, you really see that. I stayed, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, in luxury hotels in Delhi and then Calcutta because I'm old and I wanted to be pampered on this trip. And I remember, especially in Calcutta, driving to my hotel, going down this street just thronged with people and vehicles, trucks and tuk-tuks, these little almost bicycle-like vehicles, all this traffic. And right there at the side of the road, right outside my taxi window, there were young women holding babies just lying on the pavement. And I'd read about this, of course, but to see it and to see the sheer numbers of the desperately poor alongside of great wealth, like the hotel
Yes.
that I stayed in,
Yes. Right.
that
Yeah.
also shocked me.
I watch a lot of PBS because I don't know. I give them $10 a month, and I figure I need to get that money back. But one of the shows I watch is the Finding Your Roots, and it always impressed me that Finding Your Roots is usually sponsored by some cruise line that pampers you and takes you into Europe in style and grace, where you can live in luxury and have all these things and, explore, the wonders of Europe from a luxury boat. And then somewhere in the middle of, Finding Your Roots, this person learns that their, ancestors came to America in steerage. Crammed thousands of 'em in the bottom of the boat, because they came over with no money. They had $3 in their pocket or whatever, or they're slaves, their ancestors were slaves that came over in slavery ships, which were even worse. So, yeah, I've seen that juxtaposition, and it always makes me uncomfortable. I'm not inclined to take a cruise, uh, probably for that reason. I'd more likely like to go over to Europe and then, set out on my own and find out what's going on rather than be, you know, pampered in a hotel or in a cruise or something like that. But even then, I don't know that I would encounter how people actually live. And certainly in India, you saw a little bit of that from the streets.
Yeah, and before I went to India, I did a little research, um, and because I one of the things I did while I was in Delhi was get a tour of a slum, which is a term that's actually used to describe places where people are squatting,
Yep.
and they're not living there legally, but it's sanctioned by the government, and the government has actually provided plumbing and other basic services, communal bathrooms, and that sort of thing. Um, and I had the impression I got from reading some stuff online, especially proclamations from the administration of Modi, who's been in charge of India for a while now, is that things are getting better. They're on top of the poverty. Also, they're on top of the pollution, some of the environmental problems there. All of that is false. After I got back to the States, I read a long essay in the New York Review of Books that said that independent groups who've gone to India have found that actually poverty and unemployment are increasing, that the pollution, which I found shocking, in Delhi and Calcutta, also is increasing. Health conditions are terrible. There are a lot of people who are doing really well in India, are making a lot of money. The administration is helpful to the capitalists at the top of the society, helping them make more money. Meanwhile, the people down at the bottom are not benefiting. So I hate to be so negative, but I really did have a negative uh, reaction to India. I saw it as a kind of extreme example of the inequality, which I see as a consequence of unrestrained predatory capitalism here in the United States. That there are even fewer restraints on the capitalists in India, and as a result, it's really uh, a dysfunctional society, I'd say. And
Do you
I don't.
think? Do you think,
Maybe that's
John? John, do you think it's a good thing for Americans to go over there and see that as an object lesson,
I can't
or would it?
recommend. I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, you could just go to some of the big American cities and go to the places where poor people live.
Hmm.
Any of that, or even any.
Although I don't think we have much like what we saw.
No, that
Yeah.
was that was worse, and as I said, I was prepared for poverty and pollution and other problems, but it was worse than I expected, and seeing it right there in front of me, uh, really had a big effect on me.
I'll say that Modi's proclamation about how great things are going, that came out while we were there. And it came up on my cell phone because, ladies and gentlemen, I was sick for about half the trip. In fact, I was sick the whole trip, but I missed about half of it. And it was something I caught in New Jersey, not in India, I want to say to everyone. And I subsisted on eggs and toast and got through just barely. But I read Modi's report and I knew it wasn't true. I mean, I didn't have to go to a book. I didn't have to go to a statistician. I'd already been a couple places and I knew it couldn't possibly be true. But that was his forward facing public declaration of the state of things in a country that someday, not too far away, will be the most populous place on the face of the earth with a quarter
Oh,
of the world's people.
oh, it is
In,
already.
yeah,
I think it passed China in 2023. At least that's what I.
there you go. You see,
And
I'm really up on things. Yeah.
and Modi, like Donald Trump, controls the narrative for his country just by refusing to publish anything from Indian scholars and scientists that say the country is in trouble. All the news has to be good news because that's the news that Modi wants, and that, of course, is true to a certain extent here in the United States as well.
I think it's true of any government. The last president, US president that I remember who said, "Hey, we're in trouble. The economy is in trouble. The environment is in trouble, and we got to do something about it," was Jimmy Carter, and they couldn't get him out of office fast enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think you're right. I think it's the duty almost of government to say, "Hey, everything's okay. Don't worry. We've got the solution in hand. We're working on it. Everything's good. Everything's
You know,
fine."
it's an it's an interesting dilemma for journalists, for philosophers, anybody who's sort of for scholars, anybody who's commenting on the state of the world. To what extent do you want to be optimistic versus pessimistic? I've wrestled with this question when it comes to climate change. I'm really worried about the effects of human carbon consumption. Um, and but some activists over the last, I don't know, 15 or 20 years have been so grim in the way they talk about the possible consequences of climate change that I think they're going to lead people to despair and just give up and, I don't know, party until the world collapses. And so I sometimes find myself grasping at straws looking for good news. I have publicized some of the work of the Harvard scholar Steven Pinker, who's very optimistic. Everything is great. Yeah, we've got a few problems, but we're taking care of those. Don't worry, people. Um, just because I want to present that to my students and say, you might think that the world is going off a cliff, but things are okay. But then at some point that becomes irresponsible. So it's really, I guess I'm saying I sympathize with some of these politicians who are trying to put a good face on things, but not when they're lying and just covering.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, India is never. It's so populated in the cities, it will never catch up to its infrastructure needs. It's just never going to. It can't. There are some really great highways. There are some, but the road system. One of the reasons it's so crowded is, well, there's no place to build them for the most part. And once they're built, very much like in the United States, by the way, no one wants to say it. As soon as highways are built, they are already obsolete. You never stay up with the need. That's part of the problem with infrastructure. It is, as soon as it goes in, it's old hat.
We'll return to our podcast in just a moment. But first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Can you guys tell me what is this thing? What's this podcast? What's the theme or whatever?
We just talk to interesting people about interesting stuff, and we really haven't defined it any more than that because it leaves the window open for other stuff. I mean, to talk to anybody, basically, about anything.
We've had a lot of science on the show. I know we had Amanda Gefter recently talking about her essay.
I'm a big fan of hers.
Yeah, I thought you might be. So yeah,
we also talked to David Wallace once about all those different worlds that are out there.
Right.
David Wallace, the philosopher of physics, right?
Right. Multiple universe theory.
Quantum mechanics and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I first started writing about other worlds, I don't know, more than 30 years ago, and at Scientific American. And even before that, I wrote about many worlds when I was still in college. I found out these different multiverse theories, and I thought it was really cool. I mean, it was just this wonderful goad to the imagination to think that there are all these other universes in addition to ours that might have completely different properties. And then at some point, I just decided it was all bullshit. By the time I wrote The End of Science, I had decided that the many worlds theory, and there are all these other variations on multiverses. That's an example of ironic science, which is what I define as science that's more like literature than what actual science is. It can be fantastic. It can be marvelous. It can make you go, oh, wow, that's really incredible. But it's not telling us about reality.
And what was amazing was that in another universe, there was a John Horgan saying, hey, this isn't bullshit.
No, I've already thought that every single one of all the infinitude of John Horgans that are out there in other universes still thinks that multiverses are bullshit.
Okay, so at least you're in line there. And now we return you to the musical Innertube, already in progress.
Well, folks, that is one of the most forceful and interesting presentations of a trip abroad, especially a trip halfway around the world, I think we've had on this show. And since we're talking about really strange trips, and I know John will like that segue as a Grateful Dead fan, I hope. Let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein, a person I believe you have had some contact with in your in your career? I'm not saying you flew out to his island, and there are pictures of you covered with a bevy of young things, but I think you did what, I don't know, emails or something.
Yeah. Okay. So, I had 1 degree of separation from Epstein because my book agent for a while was a guy named John Brockman, who was kind of Epstein's scientist pimp.
Mm.
Put Epstein in touch with a lot of very influential scientists, including Steven Pinker, who I was just talking about, a lot of other people I know, Murray Gell-Mann, the guy who discovered quarks, Marvin Minsky, one of the pioneers of artificial intelligence, a guy named Robert Trivers, who I've interviewed for one of my books, and is one of the great biologists of the last 100 years. So I heard about this guy, Epstein, at some point, but I was never A-list enough to be invited to any of those famous parties. To Island, I have to be honest, if I had been invited, I almost certainly would have gone out of sheer curiosity. My MO when it comes to dubious individuals or institutions is to take the money and then complain about it afterwards.
Mhm.
John, you and I we had a fellowship in Cambridge in 2005 funded by the Templeton Foundation,
Yes, we did.
which is a nonprofit dedicated to reconciling. They're not even going to like how I put this, but this is basically what they do: reconciling science and religion. And it was all these really great journalists, including you, George Johnson,
Yes.
mutual friend, this great British science reporter named Michael Brooks, a lot of other really cool people, plus all these scientists and philosophers, including Richard Dawkins. It was a wonderful, I forget what it was, like 2 or 3 weeks, and they paid us a bunch of money, but I felt kind of guilty about it because the Templeton Foundation seemed a little bit. I thought they're promoting religion a little bit too aggressively through this foundation. So I wrote a piece very critical of it after taking their money. So my ethics can certainly be criticized for that, and I would have done the same, I think, if I had been invited to one of.
I was going to ask you that question. I was going to ask you that question because I've thought about it. Because I knew that you had kind of had an almost involvement with Epstein back in the day, and I thought, well, what would I do if I were a journalist in John Horgan's place? What if Jeffrey Epstein, as strange as he smelled on first glance to a journalist, and I will say that as a journalist, you look at a guy like that, something's happening and you just don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? But you can tell something's happening that, but if he had said, listen, I've got this plane, it's waiting for you at Newark Airport, hop on it, and in a few hours you'll be on my island and, you'll have a good time. He won't say the other stuff if there was other stuff. I might have, I mean, my question for you, John, is why did the scientists who were supposed to be smart guys, what was it that attracted them to this guy? I mean, first of all, he's a money. Okay, that's a good answer. I mean, he's
Money
a
and
mathematician.
sex. What else is there, John?
Okay, I think. Okay, so let's keep the sex out of it for a minute. But the money part, they were looking for funding for their research.
Sure. Okay, so I know some of the people I just mentioned. Robert Trivers.
Yes.
This great biologist who helped to explain, among other things, why humans are ever nice to each other. He wrote a paper in the 1970s called "The Evolution of Reciprocal altruism that
Yep.
explained one of the great mysteries of Darwinian theory. It's obvious why we're selfish and greedy and nasty to each other, but why are we kind to total strangers who don't share our genes? Trivers showed this, but Trivers is a difficult, sort of irascible person, um, and Epstein took an interest in him and started throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at him. He also gave a lot of money to a hack physicist named Lawrence Krauss. So if you've got some mysterious, extremely wealthy person coming up to you and saying, I think you're brilliant. I really like your work. Would you mind if I give you $100,000? I think it takes extraordinary strength of character to say, oh, I don't know. Let me think about that. I mean, to me, it's obvious why people uh, took this kind of money.
I mean, didn't he just give? Wasn't it just for? There was an article a couple of days ago in Nature that said that he'd flipped a cool 800 thousand to MIT for something. I mean, that is just a staggering amount of money.
Oh, I think he
Yeah.
gave even more to Harvard.
Yes.
He went to the top institutions because he wanted their prestige to rub off on him. That's what
Yes.
he was after. That's why he also picked certain scientists who had these huge reputations. Um, I've written about. I wrote about the Epstein affair in 2019 for Scientific American, and what I concluded, I sort of tied it to my '96 book, The End of Science, by saying that science was in even worse shape than I had predicted back in '90s, because I hadn't expected there to be this uh, careerism in which scientists compromise their ideals, the quest for truth, for simple, I don't know, greed, fame, glory, those sorts of things, which of course are very human. We're all susceptible to it. So why shouldn't scientists? But when I became a science journalist, I actually had this ideal of science in mind. Um, my thesis is that science has gotten harder. We've picked the low hanging fruit, and the problems have gotten much more difficult to solve. Some of those problems, I think, are impossible to solve and lead to flaky theories like many worlds theory of quantum mechanics. And so scientists, in their desperation to come up with something significant, exaggerate, they hype, and they take money from people they shouldn't take money from. So
Ugh.
that's what's going on.
I read recently about Epstein's beginnings, because all of a sudden he was, in the thick of things, and I said,
Everywhere.
where did he come from? Well, he was a money manager basically, and he never finished college, and he managed to latch on to one of the money houses in New York, and one of the first ways he got seed money was there was some uh, rich people who had lost their money or had it stolen, and he went out and found it for them. And once he found it for them, he kept it and got it started. And everybody said, how could that happen? And the general idea was, when rich people have something stolen, they don't go to the authorities because they don't want to answer questions on how they got it. And they also don't want to be embarrassed. And so they go to private people to retain or regain whatever they lost. And in that sense, they can be manipulated. And somehow he figured this out, and that manipulation just went on and on and on
Mhm.
to the levels that he kept rising to. So it makes sense when you say people who are a little vainglorious go to somebody like him and don't mind getting buttered up a little bit in exchange for a little bit of cash that will get them where they want to go in their studies and their theories.
No, I'd like to add another point to this whole Epstein affair, so my book, The End of Science, came out 30 years ago, and I've been asked to reflect on it. I'm writing a couple of pieces
Mm.
for different publications, and I'm always thinking about how do I think about the future of science since my book came out, and how is my thesis held up? And I can get into some of the ways in which I qualify my argument that science is running out of gas. But one conclusion that I've reached recently, and it's because of reading a history of science from like the Paleolithic up to the present by a friend of mine from Stevens, a really wonderful historian of science named James McClellan. He wrote a textbook that came out, I think, first edition was maybe 20 years ago. He's rewriting it and he's sending me chapters as he finishes them. And the big theme that jumps out from his book to me is that science never really was about truth. Science was always about power. To
Mhm.
the extent that science is funded by powerful organizations, states, corporations, warlords, whatever, it's because those people in power thought the science could make them more money, could increase their power, could have social benefits, like helping people live longer, cure diseases, improve communication, improve transportation, and kill your enemies more effectively. Uh, and the idea that science is a route to truth is kind of this little sort of sideline of science that some of the powerful states, like the US, allow the scientists to indulge. Um, and I should even see some of the things that are going on in science now, like artificial intelligence, which I find very disturbing. There are, of course, people who are hyping the new AIs and saying that, oh, this is going to lead to a whole new era of science. The AIs are going to discover all these deep truths that no mere human can discover. But no, the AI is clearly just a way for the rich and powerful to become even more rich and powerful. And a lot of the AI is being diverted into uh, warfare. It's providing another way to crush your enemies, which is something that science has been involved in for many, many centuries.
I mean, I hold no brief for any particular uh, uh, government in this, but as soon as I find out my enemy has AI, well, I got to get it. No, I
Right.
mean, I do. I mean, it's just it may be realpolitik, but realpolitik is super real. I mean, once my enemy has it, I got to get it, and I got to make it better than theirs. It's I'm not defending anything when I say that. I hope. I would love it if AI came up with something really great. In fact, I saw somebody, strangely enough, on CNBC. You love this, John, this morning, who was talking about how AI is this big, booming opportunity for investors, really going hard at it. And he says, "Oh, and I want to say something. We don't actually know." He said this on CNBC after really pushing hard for everybody to invest every last shekel in AI. He admitted what we all kind of know. We don't know what this is going to do. We don't know where this is going to go. Maybe it will help us. I hope it does. But you're a teacher of writing, John. You must bump into AI every once in a while. Am I wrong?
I teach at a tech school. So there are many reasons why I have to talk to my students about AI. I just assigned two of my classes. I teach three classes. I have two freshman classes I'm teaching, and they have to write an essay about AI for next week because all these kids, every single one, is already using AI in all their coursework. I said, I want you to tell me how you're using it in a very specific way, how it's helped you, how it's been not so effective. The only stipulation I have for this assignment, don't use AI to talk about how you use AI. I want you to actually write this on your own. A lot of them are being required to use AI in
Sure.
their coursework.
Mhm.
Some of them are software engineers, they're computer scientists, and coding now is driven by AI. The AI is already leading to layoffs in the tech industry because it produces code more efficiently than mere humans. So AI can write. You and I are writers, John, and AI can crank out like decent prose. So I see it as actually undermining the intellectual life in ways
Yeah.
that absolutely freak me out. The militarization of it, though. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many.
It's frightening, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, you said, of course, if you find out your enemy is is building AI weapons, then you've got to do it yourself. So I just suggest uh, point out that you mentioned at the beginning that I wrote a book called The End of War. That came out in 2011, I think, when Obama was still president. And so it seemed reasonable to me that humans would realize war is bad and it's this enormous drain on human resources and ingenuity, the preparations for war that our country and many others are constantly making. Um, so let's find a way to get past it. And and right now, the hope for a world without war seems. I mean, it looked pretty like a long shot when I wrote my book. Now I feel as though, I just read a big article in the New York Times about how there's a new arms race beginning because our big nuclear START treaty with the Russians just expired. Trump has no interest in a new one. Um, he wants to build up our arsenal, maybe start testing nuclear weapons. Again, there is an arms race in artificial intelligence between the U.S., Russia, China, lots of other countries. So I don't know, John. I am an optimist. I try to be a hopeful person. I've seen some really bad stuff in my life.
Yeah.
Uh, you and I both lived through the Nixon years, the assassinations of JFK and RFK, race riots. But I've never lived through a period as bad as the one right now. Um, I'm worried about the future. I'm sorry to be such a bummer on your podcast.
I mean, you're making so many good points. I think that and Don and I have talked about this a little bit. It'd be foolish not to be on your guard about things like AI. It would just be nuts. If you want to live in the world as it is, you have to make an effort to understand at least what AI is and what it's doing. There are a lot of people whose jobs do not directly involve it. Right? There are just a lot of people out there, most people, I would say, their jobs don't directly involve it. They may be being influenced by it and they don't even know. And then there is the power elite for whom this is, as you say, a tool they can't do without. And it's interesting that the big space race and the big science race right now is virtual.
Yeah.
It's taking place in terms of code, in terms of what you tell computers and how you teach computers how to find out and how to build. And actually, we're going to talk about emergence maybe someday with you, John. And I noticed that emergence is something people are looking for out of AI. We'll just see, if it comes up with something on its own, say in 10 years. So no, don't apologize for a thing. I mean, these are hard questions. They don't have to have a happy answer, and they make you think. But we are at this amazing moment where we've come to an impasse. It's not that people, I mean, and I'm only talking now about a certain kind of physics that we're talking about, of ways of explaining how the very tiny universe, very, very basic level operates. We won't go into it. but there's things about it that bother even its greatest practitioners. And so they're looking around like, why does this bother me? Why does it work like this? So there's that sort of an increasing discomfort, even among quantum physicists with quantum physics. And then there's a fact that they can't actually make it mesh with Einstein. And of course, you could just throw Einstein over, and many have actually physicists who are going in a different direction. But it's really hard to sort of to make Einstein's theory of gravity and space-time somehow come out in quantum mechanics. There's just two ways of talking that don't talk to each other. And so we don't know what to do. And string theory, John, what do you think? What's the verdict on string theory?
So my last book, which I ended up self-publishing, I've got it around here somewhere, grew out of my attempt during the pandemic to understand quantum mechanics by learning the mathematics underlying it.
So this is My Quantum Experiment, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I had to go back and I relearned calculus. I had to remember what trigonometry was like, logarithms. And I also learned about complex numbers, which are combined real numbers with imaginary numbers, which are based on the square root of -1, which doesn't even exist.
Doesn't exist, right?
And linear algebra and all this stuff. And I'm learning the rudimentary levels of this math, but enough so that I could figure out what those quantum people were talking about when they were debating many worlds theory and whether the world is deterministic or probabilistic, all these debates, all these different interpretations of quantum mechanics. And that led me back to string theory and some of these other things that I had written about so disparagingly back in the 90s. My takeaway, and this is something that I absolutely believe, is that the more we study reality, the weirder it gets. There's no hope of understanding this. We certainly might have the illusion that we figured it out. But the core of reality is a total mystery. And by the way, in the end of science, I had this whole section at the end. Remember, I wrote this 30 years ago, on what will happen if we invent super intelligent machines and they carry on science beyond us. And I have this prediction in that book that's based on a drug trip that I had back in 1981. That
John Horgan does research.
Everything. I use everything.
Absolutely. All tools are available. Absolutely.
My prediction is that the super intelligent machine at the end of time that has turned the entire universe into one gigantic mind will be even more baffled by the question of its own existence than we are. And I absolutely hold to that prediction.
That is simply wonderful. John, I feel like I'm going to fall over backward out of my chair. It's wonderful to have you on the musical Innertube. This has got to be continued. We got to have you back on at some point, and we'll talk about things that make you happy.
I've really enjoyed this. I'll talk to you guys about anything, anytime. You just give me a ring.
John Horgan, ladies and gentlemen, the musical Innertube thanks him. Check out John's life and work at his blog, johnhorgan.org. That's JOHNHORGAN.org.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Or log into our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
Our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.